Welcome to Now We're Getting Somewhere. I'm Katie, and I'm a certified life coach, but I've also been a management consultant at McKinsey and a product manager at a tech startup. In other words, I know what it feels like to have a life that looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't feel as good as I want it to. I help my professional clients develop lives that are more meaningful, happy, and also more successful. And I want to share the same practical insights with you. Let's go. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. I will say on a personal note, I am enjoying back to school season. That is something that is true about me. This is the first year that my kids are returning to the same school. So they're in different schools because one of my kids goes to special education preschool and the other one just goes to like a standard preschool. But they're both going back to the same schools that they were at last year. And man, first of all, them just going back to school has freed up a lot of time for me. And then two of them just going back to the same school. I think I didn't realize, kids are really young. There's just so many different things all the time. You're always adapting and things are always changing, and just them going back to the same schools. So we just know all the routines for that. It's so nice. I feel like there's certain seasons of life where you crave more novelty and then certain seasons where you crave routine. And I definitely feel like I'm in the latter season right now. Okay, so let's get to our podcast today. As you may have noticed, recently I've been answering a couple questions from newsletter subscribers, and I have just been having so much fun doing it. So today I'm answering another question from a newsletter subscriber who's calling herself Jay. Jay's question summary is, how do I find time and energy for friendships when I am exhausted by work and parenting? I thought this was a very relevant question for so many of us, whether or not you're a parent, of course. And then here are her question details. She says, I'm a toddler, I'm pregnant with baby number 2, and I work full time. My spouse is an involved parent, but I'm still exhausted. I can't even find the energy to text someone to make plans for a hangout or a phone call. I don't have a huge circle of friends, and I don't want to ignore the few that I have, but adding even one more thing to my to-do list right now feels overwhelming. So what are your tips for maintaining friendships when your time and energy is basically maxed out? Okay, so the first thing I want to say, Jay, to this is I relate to this. I relate to this a lot. I have totally been in that season of having a young family, of working, of having a lot of responsibility and commitments, but also knowing that friendships are important. And I really want to maintain certain friendships. And I know that I feel better when I engage with my friends. But also it can feel sometimes like maintaining friendships is number 5 on our list of priorities. And we are barely getting to numbers 1, 2, and maybe 3. So again, in authenticity, I will say, this is another one of those questions where I read it and I thought to myself, you know what, maybe someone who hasn't gotten overwhelmed, who hasn't struggled to maintain friendships should answer this question, because I actually do know some folks for whom it seems like maintaining friendships is just never an issue. It's like breathing to them. I even follow somebody like that on the internet. And then I realized most of those people either have a lot of time, often they are not working parents of young children, or they're extroverted. So even if those extroverted folks are busy and exhausted, perhaps with work and parenthood, they are still going to make sure the friendships happen because it's so core and natural and important to them. So I decided that, in fact, I'm the perfect person to answer this because I am a huge introvert, and sort of maintaining friendships in this way also wasn't super natural to me. So there was a bunch of things that I have done in my own season of feeling, particularly overwhelmed. I'm not fully out of that season. I still have young kids. I still work, but there was a couple years in there where things were really tough, which I've talked about at various points on this podcast. And so I want to talk about some of the things that were helpful for me during that season, and some things that I suggest to friends or clients in any season of life as they're trying to think through how to prioritize this. So please know that anything I'm suggesting is introvert approved and it is, overwhelmed working parent approved, which I think is a little bit practical for someone in your shoes. So today I really want to do two things. I want to start off by sharing, like I said, the same practical ideas that I would share with a client who is in your shoes to address the issue as you have defined it. You said, how do I find the time and energy for friendship? How do I not ignore the few friends that I have when I'm exhausted by work and parenting? So I want to address this question directly, but then I want to second, as we near the end of the podcast, kind of back things up to talk a little bit about kind of the higher level problem that I think may be at play here. It's higher level, it's underlying, it's sort of like the deeper cause of all of this. So let's do that. Okay, so to start us off, as I said, the first thing I want to do is just talk about how you might go about attending to friendships in a way which is doable for you when you don't have a lot of time and energy. So the high level TLDR on this is that I think you're going to have to find a way to make maintaining friendships easier and less exhausting for you. And I have 6 ideas for you on how you might go about doing that. So let's talk about those. The first one is automate it. This is the tip that I use the most in my own life, automating it, and the most common thing that I recommend to clients and see them having success with as well. So I would say on a personal level that maybe like 80% of my friendship time these days is automated. And to explain that more, what I mean by that is that it occurs on a regular basis. So I have one friend who I take a regularly scheduled stroller walk with once a month. I have another friend who I take a walk with every other week. It's just on the calendar. I have a women's group of 5 women. We meet once a month. It's just on the calendar every month. I have 2 different friends who don't live nearby who I do monthly calls with. Actually, those are both calls where I walk while I talk to them. We'll talk about how much walking I do in just a second. But all of these connection moments, I do not have to plan at all. They are just on my calendar on a regularly occurring basis. So whether it's like every other Friday or the second, Wednesday morning of the month or whatever it is, and I just show up to them and then I get to connect with my friends. For me, that is crucial. If I had to plan each and every one of these, if I am being honest, I would do a tiny fraction of them every month. Even I'm feeling much better in my life, but even now, if I had to initiate or, text back and forth to plan it, I just wouldn't do them. I would do a small fraction of them. And to give a client example here, I have a client literally right now, she was wanting more friendships. In particular, she didn't want to feel like she had to plan each hangout. So I suggested this to her that she automate time with friends. In the past several months, she has set up, I think, 3 or 4 regularly occurring monthly hangouts. So she's got a friend who she sees a movie with once a month. She has a friend who she is going to do watercolor painting with once a month. And she has like a friend who she does yoga with once a month. They are on the calendar. No one has to plan it. I mean, yeah, sometimes schedules shift around and things have to be moved around, but you take the effort out of it. And that does free up time and energy. I will say this particular client doesn't have kids. So you might not want to be like watercolor painting. That might not be for you in this season of life. I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. But the high level point, which is whenever possible, automate it, I think might really be helpful to you. So that's the first thing I'd offer. The second suggestion I would make to you would be to figure out what is relaxing and easy for you. I'll say that again. Figure out when socializing what is relaxing and easy for you. So you've probably guessed just by listening to how I tend to hang out with friends that one of my favorite ways in this particular season of my life, where again, I don't have a ton of spare energy, like things are just a little bit, my life's a little bit more energetically expensive right now. In this season where there isn't as much energy to spend, one of my favorite ways to connect with friends is over a walk. So part of that is just me personally. I take a 50-minute walk most days anyway. So if I can combine that thing that was already going to happen with friendship time, oh my gosh, perfect. I was going to do it anyway. Now I get to connect with friends over it. So for me, in the first 3 years of my kids' lives, I work from home. I have a little bit more of a flexible schedule, I will be the first to say, than somebody who perhaps works in an office. But for the first 3 years of my kids' life, I walked with them in the stroller, at least one of them in the stroller, every morning at 8 a.m. It was just like an easy way to get my exercise in while also taking care of them. So several of my connection points with friends, whether it was in person, some of the stroller walk I took with a friend, or on the phone, for years, that occurred with my kids in the stroller with me. Again, just making it so easy on myself. Now they both go to preschool in the morning, so I don't do that as much anymore, but it really worked for me for a long time. And I still have that friend I take a stroller walk with, and I still just make my kids sit in the stroller during that walk. And they're 4 and they don't love it, but I have them do it anyway because that's something that really works for me and something that I need. So for me, friendship and connection time while walking, also, I will just say, is one of the least draining times for me. And so as an introvert, and especially one who for a few years was just quite overwhelmed, that was just really important to know about myself. So as I said, my favorite type of walks are walks that are automated, so I don't even have to plan it each time. But then I do have people in my life, like my mom or my brother John or my cousin Nora, who I don't necessarily have like automated times to connect with, but I will also catch up with on the phone while I walk. But I do schedule those. But I try to even schedule those, even if they're more one-offs, while I'm walking. So again, like I said, I work from home, so it is pretty easy for me to kind of like sneak in a walk, between client calls or whatever. But that's not possible for everyone. And for other people, even if they could, maybe they don't like walking. So I will say, just to give some other examples, if I had a commute in a car to work, for example, I know that I would be doing calls during that time. Ideally, regularly scheduled calls, like maybe the first Monday of the month, I catch up with my friend from college. And the second Tuesday of the month at 8 a.m. when I'm in the car, I talk to this friend. I think the key is figure out what's going to be relaxing and easy for you. Relaxing and easy. It is not personally in this season of my life relaxing or easy to meet a friend for drinks or to go to a yoga class with a friend at this very particular time. I do enjoy those things and I do them. And I suspect that I will do them more and more as my kids get older and some elements of my life get a little bit less energetically expensive. But when I was at my most exhausted and my most overwhelmed, it had to be easy and relaxing. And for me, that was walking. So I guess the question I would offer to you is, what is that going to be for you, Jay? So that's my number 2 suggestion. Make it easy, make it relaxing. The third suggestion I have is to combine parenting and friendships when possible. Combine parenting and friendships when possible. This can take a few different forms, and it doesn't actually require that all of your friends have kids. So I'll explain a little bit more. So this could take a couple of different forms. One of the forms would be what I just mentioned. So you could plan hangouts where you could bring your kids along. So for me, until very recently, several of my monthly, regularly occurring walk and talks were when my kids were in the stroller. So one of that was with another friend who did have similarly aged kids. So she'd have 1 or 2 overtime kids in the stroller herself. But 2 of my walk and talks, both of my phone calls, were with friends who are actually past that season. They actually both have kids in kind of like high school. But I would chat with them while my kids were in the stroller. And look, did my kids sometimes like scream and demand my attention when I was on the phone? Were there occasionally meltdowns when I was on the phone? Yeah, there were. But it was also okay. It wasn't that often, and it worked for me in the season that I was in. So, you do what you can to make it work. So if you're not a walker, you can tell that I love a good walk. But if you're not a walker, maybe it's just like, your kids play in the backyard on Saturdays at 9 a.m. And during that time, you talk to some friend on the phone, or you have a friend over and you get bagels and all the kids sort of like wander the backyard on Saturdays at 9 a.m. But, whatever can be done, and it can be with friends who have kids, or it can just be like you invite a girlfriend over who doesn't have kids, but you guys do chat at that time. But you sort of make it okay. Maybe you even let your kids watch TV. Whatever has to happen so that you can do something that's really easy for you. Another thing, which I don't think I've mentioned a ton on this podcast, but really has worked for me, was a parenting class, or like I think it's really a mommy and me class. I take this really, really wonderful parenting class in La Cañada, which is this neighborhood in kind of like northeast LA. It's 2 hours a week, and half of that you kind of spend with your kids and other parents. And then half of that, the parents kind of like go away for about an hour and they talk about all kinds of parenting stuff and we share really vulnerably. And then there are these wonderful TAs who watch our kids during that time. So if anybody, by the way, is on this side of town and you want that info, just email me and I'll send it to you. But for me, having this like structured, planned, organized, regularly occurring activity, it's been so nice. And I did have one of my close friends here in LA who I did it with for 2 years. And so that was actually a really fun chance to see her. But more recently, it has just kind of like stopped working for her schedule. But I will still be continuing to go. And even, not having a more close friend there, having more just like friendly acquaintances there, it still feels like it kind of fills my friendship cup, my kind of female friendship cup a little bit. And again, I get to combine it with parenting, which has felt really helpful to me. And then the last sort of example I would give of kind of like combining parenting and friendships, hopefully this isn't TMI, but you're a mom, I'm a mom. I remember that when my kids were infants, pumping my breast milk became my texting with friends time. So if you sort of know me a little bit, you know that like I'm not a huge texter. I don't really like being on my phone when I'm working or when I'm with my kids. But when my kids were really, really, really little, I would nurse them for the last time right before they went to bed. And then I would wait an hour and then I would pump at, 9:30 or something. And during that, like 15 to 20 minutes of pumping every night, I would catch up on all my text chains with my friends. And even just like making sure that I stayed on top of my text correspondence. Again, that was really helpful for me in terms of maintaining my friendship because sometimes I could just get overwhelmed by texting. And it sounds like you sort of were saying, like, sometimes you don't even have the energy to text. And knowing that, like, this is when I text, I didn't have to think about it. It was automated. That also helped me maintain my friendships. So again, you may not do exactly what I do, Jay, but I think even just asking this question of like, how do I combine friendship and parenthood might point you in some interesting directions. So that's number 3, combine friendship and parenthood whenever possible. Okay, so number 4, my 4th idea might seem a little radical to millennials, and that's because it's a little old school. And number 4 is plan nothing. Just call when you're around and available. Plan nothing. Just call when you're around and available. My brother John, my older brother, does this. He just calls. And you know what? I miss his calls a lot. I'm like working. I don't have my phone next to me. And then I call him back. And he misses my calls a lot. And then he calls me back. And sometimes we play phone tag for a while. But then we eventually catch each other. And that's usually how we end up chatting. And we don't plan anything. My husband also just made a new friend who does this. This guy also doesn't really like to plan. That's just not his style. He prefers to just call. This particular guy is not a millennial. He's a little older. So I bet that is probably part of it. But it's just a very casual style. He just calls my husband and they chat, or they don't if my husband's not available. And then eventually he calls him back and eventually they do chat. I think if it's not your typical style, you might explicitly name that you're like trying something new with your friends. And, if you're having kids right now, you are probably a millennial. So this is not like the standard thing in my experience that millennials do. But since you're not in front of me, Jay, and this is a podcast, I just wanted to like throw out a bunch of random ideas that I think could work well for an exhausted, overwhelmed working mom. So that's number 2. Maybe you just plan nothing. Maybe you just call when you're around and when it works for you. And then the 5th idea I would offer is to make sure that you plan in a way that is easiest for you. Make sure that you plan in a way that's easiest for you. I was struck, Jay, in your initial thing that you wrote into me where you said even just texting someone to find a time to hang out feels hard. And I really relate to that, even now. I will tell a personal story here. I have a newer friend who I like quite a lot, and we're trying to kind of like grow a friendship really intentionally. Ugh, I love friends who want to be intentional about our friendship. That's so my love language. So we don't have yet kind of like an automated friendship hang. I suspect we will fairly soon, but for now it kind of feels right to like mix things up a bit, do some different things as we're getting to know each other. And I've really been reminded in the process of planning things with her, I hate planning things over text. I just hate it. You have to have all these back and forths. You're like throwing out times. Someone else is throwing out times. You're picking a place. They're picking a place. It's like, who's going to take the lead? Who's going to finalize it? Who's just going to make the decision? It's fine. I can totally get it done. I do have a bit more energy these days and I did it for a few years, but I still find it draining. So the last time we hung out, I think this was like 2 weeks ago, at the end, I was just like, you know what? Can we just pick a date and a time for what we'll do next before we leave? Because for me, discussing it live is really easy. It's not draining at all. But texting, I don't like it. And she was like, yeah, of course. And again, all these things can seem really small and they are small, but I think they also all add up. So again, if I have to plan over text and if I'm overwhelmed, I will be much less likely to reach out. But if it's already planned, if we did the planning live, I am just so much more likely to see you. And again, for me, that reduces the exhaustion and the overwhelm in a big way. So that's number 5, plan in a way that's easiest for you. And then my 6th and final suggestion on this friendship side is find extremely doable ways to let friends know that you're thinking about them. I'm going to say that again. Find extremely doable ways to let friends know that you're thinking about them. I was so struck that you wrote in, Jay, in your initial question. I'm going to quote you here. You said, I don't have a huge circle of friends and don't want to ignore the few that I have, but even adding one more thing to my to-do list right now feels overwhelming. If I was your coach and if we talked about some of the ideas I just mentioned, I could see a world in which none of them resonate, if I'm being honest. Like maybe in this particular season of life, even like a monthly automated walk with one of your kids in the stroller, it's just too much. You can't even handle that. If that's true, if nothing resonates, if everything is too much, I would probably suggest narrowing your goal to just focus on what you said there. You said that you don't want to ignore the few friends that you have. You don't want to ignore the few friends that you have. I do not think you need to be planning lots of hangouts in order to just not be ignoring them. And what if that was your focus in this very particular, will not last forever season of your life? What if your focus was just not ignoring the friends that you have? To me, if that was your goal, then that really has some implications for how you want to approach it. Because if you're just trying to not ignore them, then maybe your only goal is once a week you shoot off 2 texts to friends, letting them know that you're thinking of them. Or maybe you have a goal of once a day on weekdays, you send 1 text to a friend while you're standing in line. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying, oh my goodness, if you sent like 1 thinking of you or like, here's something that reminded me of you or just here's a funny meme text per day, that's actually a lot of texts. That's actually a lot of friendship maintenance. So I think in this last point, I just want to offer you that another option for you, another thing to grab from this like buffet of friendship options in this podcast is just narrowing your goal down to something that is just profoundly doable to you, to letting your friends know that you are thinking about them. Or in your words, just making sure that you aren't ignoring your friends. Okay, so for all of my tired and overwhelmed folks, I just want to summarize all of that. Here are my 6 practical suggestions for maintaining friendships when you are tired and overwhelmed. But this will not be the end of the podcast. I have one more point to give after this, so stay tuned. The first one, but just to summarize, the first one is automate it. You know that I love to do that. Number 2, figure out what is easy and relaxing for you. Also just incredibly important. 3, combine parenting and friendships whenever possible. 4, plan nothing. Just call when it's easy for you. 5, plan in the way that's easiest for you. And 6, find extremely doable ways to just not ignore your friends. Okay, so those are my very practical friendship-oriented tips. But as we are finishing up here, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that if I were actually your coach, I would, yes, target the practicalities of friends, but I would not let you avoid widening the lens a bit. If I was actually your coach, at some point I would look you in the eye and say, look, Jay, hopefully I have given you some ideas about how to maintain friendships. Hopefully those will be helpful. But fundamentally, beneath even that, girl, you've also got an energy and overwhelm problem. You do. And part of that, totally, it's your life stage. You are working, you have young kids, it's a lot. Part of that is just circumstance, but part of that you can control. You can get some energy back. You can reduce your overwhelm to some degree. I am 100% certain of this, certain in my bones, because this is a bread and butter topic for me as a coach. I work with clients on this every day of the week. You can get energy and time back from work. Maybe that's where it's going to come from. You can reduce your stress and overwhelm there if you want. Most of my clients can get back 5, often up to 10 hours a week back from work if they want to get really creative, if they're open to it. You also can get time and back from your energy back from your personal life. You can reduce overwhelm in your personal life. This is the kind of thing where it's really helpful to sort of like have us be able to talk one-on-one so I can go really deep into how you're spending your time. You know, is your leisure time actually rejuvenating to you? Are your thoughts exhausting you? How's your communication and division of labor with your co-parent? Is your style of parenting yourself just kind of exhausting you? It tends to be very personal in my experience. No two people are doing the exact same things. That's why like the sort of one-on-one coaching model tends to work so well. But I just want to plant this seed because I don't want to stay so focused on techniques for cultivating friends that we ignore the elephant in the room. I am confident that it is possible for you to reduce a significant amount of your exhaustion and overwhelm. Again, I'm not going to be a Pollyanna. I'm not going to say all of it. This is just not going to be your most relaxing, rejuvenating season of life. There's no way to do that. But I have typically found that people have more energy available in the budget than they initially expect if they make it a priority. Even as I say that, what comes up for me is just wanting to say also, like, please don't make the fact that I've said that another thing to overwhelm you. Like, oh, I'm messing up. I need to get my energy back. I'm not doing this right. I just want to remind you of this to give you some agency. This is not set in stone. You can make it better for yourself. So that's what I mean when I say, let's not act like this is just a friendship problem, because it's also an energy problem. And I would love for you to be doing whatever you can to address that too. So Jay, I am wishing you all the best. I hope that with these ideas, you maintain those friendships and that matter to you and that nourish you. And I hope you find a way to feel even a little less tired and overwhelmed in such a full season of life that is young kids and is working. I know that so many of us out there can relate, Jay, and I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for everyone else too. Take care, everyone. If you really want to change in a meaningful, lasting way, that's when you need a life coach. Every client I've worked with has had incredibly personalized reasons why they're in the tired or anxious or stuck or uninspired state they're in. Working with me can help you identify those roadblocks, which are usually blind spots that you genuinely cannot see, and implement a profoundly customized, doable plan for overcoming them. I have a very small, high-end, one-on-one coaching practice. If you'd like to be my next client, reach out at katiesiever.com. I'd love to meet you.